My neighbors disappeared overnight and left a clue that revealed something terrifying. When I moved into the quiet suburban neighborhood, it was everything I had hoped for: peaceful, friendly, and uneventful. My next-door neighbors, the Smiths, were a cheerful couple in their 50s. We exchanged pleasantries occasionally, but they mostly kept to themselves. One day, I noticed their house had been unusually quiet. The lights were off, the car was gone, and I hadn't seen them in days. At first, I assumed they were on vacation, but as weeks passed with no sign of them, I grew concerned. Then, one morning, I found a package on my doorstep addressed to the Smiths. It was odd, considering they hadn't been around to receive it, and the handwriting on the label was shaky and uneven. The return address was smudged, almost illegible, but one word stood out: help. Curiosity got the better of me, and I decided to open the package. Inside was a single old-fashioned key and a handwritten note that sent chills down my spine. If you're reading this, it's too late. Use the key. The truth is in the basement. My heart raced as I stared at the key, wondering what it could possibly unlock. After wrestling with my conscience, I decided to check the Smiths' house. I had to know what happened to them. I found their front door unlocked, and the house was eerily silent as I stepped inside. Everything was in its place, as if they had just stepped out and never returned. I made my way to the basement door, the key clutched tightly in my hand. The key fit perfectly, and as I turned it, the door creaked open, revealing a narrow staircase leading down into darkness. My heart pounded in my chest as I descended, flashlight in hand. At the bottom of the stairs, I found a small, dimly lit room. It was filled with old furniture and dusty boxes, but in the center of the room, there was a table with a single, ominous object on it, a small, wooden box. The box had a strange symbol carved into its surface, something I didn't recognize. I hesitated, but then slowly lifted the lid. Inside was a stack of photographs. As I flipped through them, my blood ran cold. The photos were of the Smiths, but they weren't alone. Each photo showed them with different people, neighbors from around the block, all of whom had mysteriously moved away over the past year. But the last photo was the most disturbing. It was a picture of me, taken from outside my window just a few nights before. I dropped the photos, my hands shaking. Suddenly, I heard footsteps coming from the floor above me. Someone else was in the house. I quickly grabbed the box and fled the basement, racing out of the house and back to mine. I locked the doors, my mind racing with questions. Who had taken that photo? What happened to the Smiths and the other neighbors? And why was I next? Days passed, and the house next door remained silent. I wanted to report it to the authorities, but something told me it would only make things worse. That night, as I lay in bed, unable to sleep, I heard a knock at my door. When I opened it, there was nothing but a single photograph lying. That night, as I lay in bed, unable to sleep, I heard a knock at my door. When I opened it, there was nothing but a single photograph lying on the doorstep. My hands trembled as I picked it up. It was another picture of me, taken from outside my house. But this time, there was a figure in the background, tall, shadowy, and standing in the very spot where I had taken the key to the Smith's basement. Panic surged through me. Whoever had taken the photo knew I had been in the Smith's house. They were watching me, just as they had watched the Smiths and the others who had vanished. My mind raced with thoughts of what could happen next. I couldn't stay there. Grabbing only the essentials, I left my house in the middle of the night, my heart pounding as I drove away. I didn't have a plan, just a desperate need to get as far from that neighborhood as possible. As I drove, I glanced in the rearview mirror. The dark, narrow streets felt like they were closing in on me, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being followed. But when I looked closer, I saw nothing but the empty road behind me. Finally, after what felt like hours, I pulled into a motel far outside of town. Exhausted and terrified, I checked in and locked myself in a room, double-checking the windows and doors. It was only then that I allowed myself to collapse onto the bed, trying to calm my racing thoughts. In the quiet of the motel room, I couldn't help but think about the Smiths and the others who had disappeared. What had happened to them? What was in that photograph, and why was I a part of it now? Sleep didn't come easy, but when it finally did, I dreamed of the Smiths' basement, the dark, hidden room, the ominous box, and the photographs that had changed everything. But the most haunting part of the dream was the figure in the background, always watching, always waiting. When I woke up the next morning, I knew I couldn't keep running forever. I had to find out the truth about what was happening in that neighborhood. But for now, all I could do was keep moving, hoping that wherever I went next, the shadows wouldn't follow. But deep down, I knew they would. I left the motel as soon as the sun rose, driving aimlessly through small towns and back roads, trying to distance myself from the terror that had taken hold of my life. But no matter how far I drove, the feeling of being watched never left me. Days turned into weeks, and I moved from place to place, never staying long enough to be found. But the photographs kept appearing, on my car windshield, slipped under hotel room doors, even mailed to places I hadn't yet decided to go. Each one showed me in different places, always with that same shadowy figure in the background. I realized I couldn't outrun whatever was happening. It was a nightmare that wouldn't end, and it was driving me to the edge of sanity. The only way out, I decided, was to confront it head-on. So, I returned to the neighborhood, to the Smith's house, and to the basement where it all began. The house was still and empty, exactly as I had left it. The key was still in my pocket, the box still on the table. But this time, I wasn't afraid. I knew I had to face whatever was waiting for me. As I opened the box again, there was something I hadn't noticed before, a small, hidden compartment underneath the photos. Inside was a torn piece of paper, with a single word scrawled on it, home. The meaning was clear. The figure had been leading me here, back to the place where everything started. And now, it was time to find out why. When I returned to my house, I found a single light on in the living room. My heart pounded as I entered, knowing I was no longer alone. Standing in the center of the room was the man from the photos, the shadowy figure who had been stalking me. He looked older, worn by years of anger and sorrow, but his eyes were sharp, determined. In his hands, he held the wooden box from the Smith's basement, cradling it like a precious artifact. "You finally came back," he said, his voice low and controlled. "Just as I knew you would. Who are you? Why are you doing this?" I demanded, trying to steady my shaking hands. "My name is William," he said, stepping closer. "This house, it was supposed to be mine. My father promised it to me, but he broke that promise. He sold it to the Smiths when I was away, serving overseas. When I came back, everything was gone. My family, my inheritance, my future. They took it all from me. So you've been haunting this place, driving everyone away?" I asked, horrified at the lengths he had gone to. "Not just haunting," he replied, a twisted smile forming on his lips. "I've been orchestrating everything. The disappearances, the fear. It was all part of my plan. You see, I needed someone to uncover the truth, to dig deep enough to bring it all back to light. And you did just that." I stared at him, my mind racing. "You wanted me to find the box? To uncover your past?" "Yes," he said, his eyes gleaming with a mix of madness and satisfaction. "The box contains proof that this house was meant to be mine. The Smiths found it, and when they refused to leave, I made them disappear. But I needed someone else, someone who would expose it all without suspicion falling on me. That's where you came in. So this was all part of your plan?" I asked, the realization making my skin crawl. "Every step," he said, his voice dripping with satisfaction. "And now, with the truth out, I'll take back what's mine. But there's just one loose end to tie up you." Before I could react, William lunged at me, trying to grab the box. But I was quicker. I dodged his grasp and smashed the box against the wall, breaking it open. Papers and old photographs spilled out, revealing the hidden compartment William had been so desperate to keep secret. Among the scattered items was a letter, yellowed with age. I grabbed it and read aloud. "To my son, William, I'm sorry for breaking my promise, but this house is no longer safe. I've made enemies, and selling the house is the only way to protect our family. Forgive me." William's face twisted in anger and pain as he heard the words. "He lied to me," he whispered, the weight of his father's betrayal finally breaking through his madness. "I did all of this for nothing." "You've been punishing the wrong people," I said, lowering the letter. "It wasn't the Smiths or anyone else who took this from you. It was your father." William fell to his knees, the fight draining from him. "What have I done?" he muttered, staring at the broken remains of the box, the last piece of his shattered life. I stepped back, the intensity of the moment overwhelming. "It's over, William. It's time to let go." For a long moment, he didn't move. Then, slowly, he stood up, his face a mask of defeat. Without another word, he walked out of the house, leaving behind the wreckage of his plans and the life he had tried so desperately to reclaim. I never saw him again. I left the house soon after, knowing that some things are better left buried. But as I drove away, I couldn't shake the feeling that, in some twisted way, William had finally gotten what he wanted: closure.